give them a minute.
Yep. I do see Carol Willis is not here. I hope she's not having problems connecting.
She
I
said
know
she was gonna dial in,
Okay.
and she actually said that she was gonna try and video, but definitely I talked to her earlier today, so I know she's definitely planning on joining.
Yep. Okay. I do see Carol Willis is not here. I hope she's not having problems connecting. I know she was So those of you who are not members of the planning board, if you could just mute your microphones for now until we get to the portion of the meeting where we solicit public input. John, just so you know, I've had a lot of requests from the public who want to make comment at tonight's meeting. I've told them that it's not a public hearing. This is really a policy discussion among planning board members, and it's at the discretion, your discretion, and the board's discretion, whether or not they want to open it up to public comment.
Yeah, we're going to have a, well, I'm assuming that they want to talk about the master plan element
Right.
discussion, and we will have a public hearing. There will be a public hearing on that issue. So tonight is just for us to determine what we're going to do as a planning board.
Right. Okay, so John, you can call the meeting to order.
All right, great. Good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. We are being streamed live on YouTube.com. We're also being broadcast live on Channel 34. You can tune in to us via WebEx with a link that is posted on the Planning Board website at the top of tonight's agenda. This evening's meeting will also be available on demand on YouTube after it's completed. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and we'll be exercising powers and procedures that resemble a court of law. And so we're obligated to act objectively in determining facts and drawing conclusions. And those conclusions will be used as the basis for official action from the board. For that reason, we would ask that questions or comments during these proceedings will be limited to only those issues that the board may legitimately consider at such times when comments are asked for or being received by the board. Excuse me. It is important for us to maintain order, particularly since we are doing this via video and we are still learning the ropes, having been new at this for just a few meetings. So with that said, I'll move on to our roll call, and I am here.
Okay. Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mayor Spiller.
Present.
Mr. Cook. Councilor Schlager.
Here.
Ms. Willis. Okay, she may still be trying to connect. Mr. Rooney.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally.
Here.
Ms. Lockman. I might have, Carmel, I know you're here. I might have muted you. Carmel.
Yeah.
Ms. Lockman.
Loud and clear.
Mr. Barr is excused. Mr. Gilmer.
Here.
Okay. And Mr. Neese. Arthur, are you here?
I am here.
Okay. All right.
All right. Before we get on with our the rest of our agenda, I'd just like to take a moment to welcome Mayor Spiller and congratulate him on his election victory and welcome him. This is the first planning board meeting I think that I've seen you on this side of the dais, so to speak.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me and those kind words. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all for the great work you do.
All right. We have minutes from our June 22nd meeting.
I received changes to the minutes from Ms. Lockman and from Vice Chair Brodock. Are there any other changes to the minutes?
No.
I have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
was that Keith? Was that Vice Chair Brodock?
Yes.
Okay.
Then, oh, go ahead.
All right, I'm just gonna read the roll because I can't really one by one. Chair Nguyen,
Yes, approved.
Vice Chair Brodock,
Yes.
Councillor Spiller, you're have to abstain.
Yes.
Councillor Schlager, I'm sorry, Mayor Spiller.
Yes.
Mr. Ian Wally.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Ms. Lockman,
Yes.
Mr. Barr's not here. Mr. Gilmer.
Yes.
Okay. The minutes are adopted.
Before we move on, Janice, could you mute? There's a couple of call-in users there's a lot of noise coming through.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Ian Wally.
Yes, sorry.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I see, yeah. If I,
474 TOP.
I think one of those is Carol. Carol?
It sounds that way.
Carol, are you on? Does everybody else hear Carol Willis? Or am I,
It kind of sounds like her.
Carol, are you at 973-868 or who is 973-868? I can't hear you. 973-868 is who? Okay. How about 609? Who's 609-513? All right, I can't hear anything.
Hey, Janice, it looks like there's sound coming through Mr. Schwartz's line as well.
Okay. All right, there we go. All right, so who is 973-868?
Is that you?
No, I'm not on, that's the phone number. I'm not.
All right, who's 609-513? All right.
That's me. Can you hear me okay?
Who are you?
I'm Walter. I'm a call-in person. I'm not on the board or the council.
Okay, I'm just trying to identify find one of our board members. I think she's here.
Yep. Okay, I'll mute.
I'm waiting for you.
I just can't.
Can't find her.
I
So
can't.
Carol,
listen
Carol, are
to-
you 973-868?
Why don't you call in for now?
There's still sound coming through Mr. Schwartz's line.
I turned it off.
I know, but I think he's muting it, and I think you're trying to mute it, so it ends up being unmuted.
He's unmuted. All right.
There we go.
So Carol, can you hear me? Did we lose her? All right. Okay, well, let's proceed with the meeting. John?
Okay, we have resolution on the Lorraine Avenue tank project.
And I received amendments to the resolution from Vice Chair Brodock. I don't know if there are any other changes to that resolution.
No.
A motion to approve the resolution.
Motion to approve.
Was that Steve Rooney?
Yep.
Second?
Second is Tony.
Second.
All right. Let's do the roll call again. Chair Nguyen,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brodock, Mr. Cook. I don't know if you were there for the meeting, so. Councillor Schlager.
Yeah, I wasn't there for the whole meeting either.
Okay, so we'll skip you. Mr. Rooney.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Ian Wally.
Yes.
Ms. Lockman.
Yes.
And Mr. Gilmer.
Yes.
Okay, this is the resolution for the Lorraine Avenue tanks. So that was just approved. Okay, and that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is the Board of Adjustment Annual Report. Let me pull that up. This is the Board of Adjustment Annual Report is a statutorily required report in which the Board of Adjustment, whose purpose is really to hear applications that require significant deviations from the zoning ordinance, particularly regarding the use variance. So they made a report to the board with the recommendations from 2019, which is what I pulled up right here. We do this every year, and this is what we normally do is we recommend that the report be considered by the zoning subcommittee to advance whatever changes are required to the ordinances for consideration by the planning board and then ultimately to the council. This report, for your information, also goes to the council too, so they have a copy of it as well. So my suggestion is a lot of these comments were in the report last year. If you recall, we made some initial changes to the zoning ordinance. But because the changes were so broad, we tried to break it down into parse it down into smaller changes, not everything all at once. So there's still work to do. And I think this is something that you'll have to work with this new council on to move all those other changes ahead. So my recommendation at this point is to send this report to the zoning subcommittee to review it and make recommendations to the council or to the planning board and ultimately the council.
I have a question.
Oh,
Sure.
go ahead.
Me, Carmel. So,
Yeah, Carmel, go ahead.
Yep. Number 3, that's an incredibly broad recommendation, if I'm reading it correctly. It seems like they're asking the council to look at all the recommendations, and there are a lot, in the land use and circulation element, and say whether they want to include them in the master plan or not include them. I mean, that's an incredibly broad recommendation. Am I missing something here? Am I misreading this?
I think perhaps we probably 2 years ago, we came out with a very lengthy and comprehensive amendment to the zoning ordinance to implement many of the changes from the plan, from the master plan. Those changes were reviewed and approved by the planning board and sent to the council, and the council, it included some significant changes in density and other things. The council sent it back and said that they wanted more background information and evaluation and all those changes. So that's when we started doing it piecemeal, and it became a very slow process. So that might be what the zoning board of adjustment is referring to, because they worked with the zoning subcommittee on crafting those changes. But that comment really pertains directly to the council, and it's really not directed towards the planning board.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments or on this issue?
No.
Okay, then and you agree that we should send it to the zoning subcommittee. What I can do is following this meeting, I can set up a meeting with the zoning subcommittee to discuss these recommendations.
Hey, this is Tony. Number 6, modification of required minimum lot frontage width. I thought that was done.
It was not.
It was not done. Oh, so the lists were established but never acted on by the council?
Let me go read the. We recommended some changes, but we had talked about adding this language to it, but it was never actually adopted. So that's
by our board or
by the council. It was never adopted by the council.
That's lumped into number 3 then, I guess, right? It's not different from number 3. It's all
right.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Janice, you're going to refer this over to the committee, and the committee will report back to us?
Right.
I don't know about the rest of you guys. You're fading out a little on me, Janice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
Very well.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. All right. So the next item on our agenda is the master plan subcommittee report on the master plan amendment. And I'm looking, I don't see Carol Willis on the list of participants. I know that she submitted a separate report to me later this afternoon.
Oh, she did.
She did. So her concern was the report that was distributed to everybody.
Yeah.
That was called the minority report.
Yeah.
She didn't feel, she didn't write that, and she didn't feel it adequately expressed her position. So I have 2 reports to present tonight. One is the majority report that was prepared by Carmel and Daniel Gilmer. And I have the report that Carol sent to me today.
Excuse me, can you hear me for a second?
Is that Martin?
Yes.
Martin.
I've received an emergency message from Carol. She's having a lot of trouble logging in and is struggling to do that. And she says she's going to try it one more time, and if not, she's asked me to run over with a computer to help her and let her get on. So I'm going to give it another minute, and if I get a text from her saying she can't do it.
Has she tried calling in? Because you could call.
I'm actually listening to a careful. No, a town planning committee.
That's somebody else. Anyway,
that's another call-in. Hang on, Martin. Let's mute the call-in user.
Yeah, I'm sorry
Thank
to
you.
interrupt, but it seemed worth it. So let her try and log in for another minute, and if not, I'm about 2 minutes away from her, and I can try and help her out here and let her get on my computer. Okay? I'm muting myself again now.
Okay.
Okay, shall I start?
So I have one question though. So Janice, you said that the minority opinion report that we got in the mail is not the
latest.
So
what Carol told me today is that she didn't write that, and she felt it didn't adequately represent her position.
So if she can't get on, if we can't hear from her tonight, then what would we do?
May I suggest?
Hi, this is Tommy. I have a suggestion. Because I've been reading everything like in a very detailed fashion, and to have some report, foisted upon us like right now doesn't make any sense. If I could ask you, Janice, to go through the documents that we're supposed to review, I would start with what is the land use circulation element that is been adopted. I've got a copy that says the date is April 24th, 2017. I assume that's what we're starting with. And please tell us what we are looking at and where those amendments fit in this document if I have the correct document. I need to get everything kind of squared away before I hear about opinions, if you don't mind.
Okay, Tony, you're actually a step ahead. Okay, that would be the next step.
Yeah.
What we received from the master plan subcommittee report is it's almost like a position paper on the.
Oh, I'm not talking about the report. I'm talking about the document that has a bunch of edits in it. It looked like it was some proposed edits. Actually, can I start with my first question? Is this April 24th, 2017? Is this the adopted master plan that we're starting with?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then there's a document that was circulated that it's titled Master Plan. Just bear with me, I apologize. I know the two reports. Okay, there's a document that was attached to your memo, Janice, dated June. Your memo was dated June 17th, 2020.
Mhm.
And there's a Montclair State Complete Streets Implementation Plan. What is that document? Those page numbers, are they, where do they come from? Are those expected to be amendments to the document, the land use circulation plan dated April 24, 2017?
So let me take a step back. The document that you have where everything's highlighted in yellow.
That's it, yeah.
That's a edited version of the Complete Streets Implementation Plan, okay?
Okay.
The Master Plan Subcommittee met in June, and they went through the Complete Streets Implementation Plan and wanted to incorporate those pages from the Complete Streets Implementation Plan into our master plan. So
Okay.
that was the edited document that came out of the subcommittee.
Okay, and those someone is going to edit those. So we have a few pages, and those changes, if, we hear about pluses or minuses, the proposal is to edit section 2.1 on transportation and mobility in the master plan?
That was my suggestion, is that if we're going to amend the master plan, I included those pages that this is where it should be located.
Okay, got it. Thank you for being patient. Thank you.
I know it's confusing.
Can I start, Janice?
I would defer to Chair Nguyen, who's running the meeting. I'm just
facilitating.
And you want to, and Carmel, you want to comment on the materials that the subcommittee submitted?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I know Carol is trying to call in. I did speak with her earlier today. She gave me a heads up that she wanted to be heard on this topic. So I think we should try and give her, this is the last really substantive thing on our agenda this evening. I think we should try and give her the opportunity to call in and be heard. And I'm not sure how Martin's fitting into the picture, whether he's trying to get something over to her, whether she's having problems dialing in. But I would like to at least suggest that before we start talking about this, that maybe we take a 5-minute break, and I'll try and reach out to her and see if I can reach her by telephone and see what's going on.
Okay, just to tell you, John, what we had talked about as a subcommittee and planned to do was to pretty much have the opinions up on the screen, and then basically I was going to read through them for the benefit of those who are calling in by telephone and may not see what we have in front of us. It's a short report, so I was going to read the majority opinion report, and Carol then was going to read her minority opinion report.
Okay.
So we'll wait.
Right. So,
Folks, can you hear me at the moment?
Yes.
Okay, I've now run over to Carol's to try and help her. Her phone is not working. She's in technology hell at the moment. So I'm now with her. I'm going to try and, if you just give a couple of minutes, I'm going to try and sit her down here and get her set up for you all. And I'm going to back away and let her do her thing. Okay, so if you just take a pause for a minute. I'll try and turn on the video too, which I had blocked for me. I'm going to now put it on for her, and hopefully that'll work out for you. Okay.
Okay.
Just give a minute here.
All
Have a
right.
seat, Carol.
Try and give them the opportunity to straighten this out.
But just to clarify, Carmel, your point was that we could go through reading the opinion, and then if we need to take a break at the end of that, perhaps take a break, since Carol's familiar with the majority opinion already, just as an option. But I think that's what you were saying. Not that we get into any discussion, but
Yes, it was just.
Right. She's on hold. Okay.
Okay. You want to wait.
All right. All right. I don't see video for me. Is that here?
You have to turn on your, you have to
You gotta turn it on.
Can you? Okay, just hang on a second, because it went away. This.
It's at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah,
Down
just
to the
hang on.
bottom of the screen.
Okay, there we go. All right, seems to be coming on. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Can't see you, Martin.
You can see me now?
No,
Not yet.
your video's not
Okay,
on.
I'm putting Carol. The video's not on?
The
No.
video's
Not
not
yet.
on.
It's trying to connect. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm on my iPhone hotspot, so this may be a problem.
Might be.
Oh, as long as we, Carol, if we hear your voice, can you see, can you see my screen?
I can see you. Let me
Okay.
just get you in
And we can
position
hear
here.
you.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. I've had a rough time getting in with you guys.
I apologize, Carol. I'll try and rectify that prior to the next meeting. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so
Carol,
much.
While you were trying to get hooked in here, Carmel just indicated that the plan was that she would go through the majority opinion from the committee, and then you would review the minority opinion from the committee.
That's fine. I really appreciate you giving me the chance to get in on this. I know I'm late and I apologize.
That's fine.
Understood. So Carmel, why don't you go ahead and proceed?
Okay. All right. Well, you have the majority opinion up on your screen. So basically, since June 22nd meeting, the Master Plan Subcommittee, which consists of myself, Dan Gilmer, and Carol Willis, we spent over 6 hours in both in-person meetings and telephone calls trying to grappling with what we thought about the Safe Streets Plan and how we should or should not absorb it into the master plan. So we really couldn't reach a consensus. So therefore, we had written a majority opinion, what we all reviewed, and a minority opinion that we all reviewed. So the issues are very complex. It was a 2-to-1 vote among the subcommittee how to proceed. So anyway, what I thought I would do was present the majority report, and Carol will present, as she said, the minority report. I will essentially read the report for those who are on the meeting and who cannot read what's on the screen here. It's a short report, so don't worry about it. Anyway, I want everyone to understand what we're doing and what we looked at. So basically, the Master Plan Subcommittee carefully considered whether or not to recommend the Planning Board inclusion of the June 2017 Montclair Safe Streets Implementation Plan that we're calling Safe Streets Plan into the Master Plan. The subcommittee reviewed the pedestrian elements and the biking elements. We reached a consensus back with the Planning Board in December 2019 that all of the pedestrian safety measures in the Safe Streets Plan, which are pages 14 to 19, are supported and could be included into the master plan. The full Planning Board supported this position. To move the project forward at the June 22nd meeting of the planning board, the subcommittee presented language amending the master plan to include these pedestrian safety measures and noted it would continue to work on that part of the Safe Streets plan that addressed biking. Those are pages 20 to 31. As I said, subsequent to that June 22nd meeting, the subcommittee met on 2 occasions to consider biking elements of the Safe Streets plan, and we had many phone calls totaling about 6 hours. The essence of the issue with respect to biking, the subcommittee grappled with what seemed to be the essence of the effort to make streets open and safer for cyclists. That is, should the master plan promote painted bike lanes or hard barrier bike lanes? However, the question remains, what changes are really feasible? The subcommittee has listed its feasibility concerns below. Can you move the screen up? But we had 2 recommendations. The first recommendation is that our consensus was that if there was a reconfiguration of the streets proposed to accommodate any type of bike lane, then before such a change is made, owners of businesses, lessors of commercial space, institutions, churches, homeowners, apartment house, and house renters, which line either side of the street under consideration for this reconfiguration, must be formally notified by the town of the proposed changes. Such notification should include a description of the change. A public hearing on the proposed change should then be scheduled well in advance of the proposed time frame for this change. If 30% or more of these entities oppose the proposed change by submission of a written signed petition, then the change cannot be made. That 30% benchmark was selected as it is the same as that used by the Historic Preservation Commission when it seeks public approval for the designation of a neighborhood as an historic district. There's a lot of background noise here. The second recommendation was that the undersigned members of the subcommittee, that would be Dan and myself, would like the planning board to vote on amending the transportation and mobility section 2.1 of the master plan to include pages 14 to 31 of the Safe Streets plan as written with the condition noted above. That's recommendation 1, where there's a 30% buy-in. Notice could be provided for a public hearing to begin and a meeting to be designated. We did note, however, there are many feasibility issues to consider. And the subcommittee would like to see steps taken to accommodate cyclists, of course. However, the subcommittee noted the following points for the planning board to consider that address the feasibility of implementing some of the recommendations of the Safe Streets plan. Changes to street configurations to add bike lanes may require both heightened enforcement of speed limits and/or no parking rules. Policing practices may need to be changed. If there are permanent bollards or barriers installed, how will garbage collection, street cleaning, and public street snow removal function? Most Montclair streets have frequent driveways and many cross streets. They are not uninterrupted roadways. This configuration may not be conducive to barrier bike lanes. Montclair is a town of abundant lawns and trees. How will private landscapers position their machinery and operate if they are not able to park in front of their clients' locations? Will this create a safety hazard as landscapers and their machinery cross the roads? Delivery vans and trucks are very active in town. Again, will they be asked to park away from the delivery sites because of parking restrictions? Will this be an enforcement and safety issue? Also, is it fair to cause a delay in the operations of these service providers in the interest of limited use bike lanes? How will moving vans, which take hours to load and unload household goods, operate if they cannot park in the front of their client's home when the client doesn't have a driveway? Will bikes abide by rules not to pass the numerous school buses? How will this be enforced? And one thing that's not on there that occurred to me later is, what about runners? How will runners share the roads with barrier bike lanes and cars? After input on this report from the planning board, the subcommittee will move to amend the transportation and mobility section 2.1 of the master plan language according to what the planning board decides. I just wanted to say too that to outline the process. So the planning board votes on proposals, the majority or the minority proposal. The subcommittee will then draft language to on the safety with respect to the master plan that they will present to the planning board. They'll have a public hearing on this language, the amending language. And they'll update the language again to the master plan if the outcome of the public hearing so dictates. Then the planning board will review and adopt this, whatever is decided, into the master plan. Thank you.
Ms. Talley, before we jump into any discussion, can you turn off the chat, because it's really distracting to have these. I keep getting noise and pop-ups while I'm trying to focus on what Ms. Lockman was saying and read the document.
I think I turned it off. I'm not quite sure how to do that on here. Nope, I
No,
did not.
there's still stuff popping up.
Let's see.
But in good news, I did see Ms. Willis on the camera there just a minute ago.
I don't know. I'm looking. I don't know how to close the chats.
And let me just make the point. Well, okay, so everybody seemed to be chatting in with their opinion. Here's the deal. If this is very distracting. The chats aren't part of the hearing. You know, it's not part of the public process. It doesn't get recorded anywhere but for the pop-ups on the screen. So it's not, I see my words are falling on deaf ears here. It doesn't help the case, by the way.
Yeah. If I may, I just wanted to ask if Dan has anything to add.
Yes. So, yeah, a couple of thoughts, and then be good to get, make sure Carol has time as well. Just first and foremost, I think also with what we've presented here, the focus being on safety first and foremost. And so we already see many people on the roads already biking. It's not that having the opportunity for an implementation plan changes the fact that people are already on the road. So just want to first highlight the safety element to it. And then we can discuss a lot of the other items as we have discussion as a group. Oh, the one other piece too, on the feasibility side, in case there's any confusion here. So we have recommendation 1, recommendation 2. The second one is to amend the master plan to include pages 14 to 31. So we stand by recommendation number 2, even in light of some of these feasibility concerns. Just by example, number 6 talks about moving vans. Number 7, other navigability for people who may be biking. So again, feasibility concerns for the planning board to discuss or even hear from the public on, but does not preclude our recommendation that we vote on the complete Safe Streets implementation plan as written to amend into the master plan. So just in case there's any confusion about the feasibility concerns that are listed and what our recommendations are.
Thanks, Dan. I just wanted to say that I have been persuaded to change my viewpoint. At one time, I really didn't think that having bike lanes in Montclair would work very well. But I think now that was kind of a failure of my imagination and a lack of faith in Montclair's ability to tackle the obstacles that we do see that there are obstacles. But now I believe that Montclair can do this. And I also had a doubt in the residents' willingness to cooperate on sharing the streets. But I feel like, for me, I've changed my viewpoint. I fully support trying to add this Safe Streets plan to our master plan and hope that we can work that out.
And that's part of recommendation 1 too, just in the report for the sake of clarity, is that there's an implementation plan that we would amend into the master plan, but that, we've made the concession that there is a way for people along the path to have a say, if there would be any improvements on their street. And I think it's, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the report was completed 3 years ago. It was presented to us over 2 years ago. And as Carmel alluded to, I think I was the very vocal voice at that time in 2018, but I think the lone voice suggesting that we amend the master plan to include these this complete Safe Streets implementation plan. So a lot has changed over this time, and I think it'd be really important for us to be responsive to what we've heard from the community and ultimately at least vote on these pages as written, and then hear from the public. If there's other directions that we might take, that's fine, but I think as a first step to have public hearing and ultimately vote on this would be the most positive step at this point.
Thank you, Dan. Yep.
So before we proceed with Carol, I just want to talk again directed to the members of the public who are sending out the message in the chat. Just like during any normal planning board meeting, we would not want members of the public shouting out things to the members of the board while we're trying to conduct the business of the board. We'd appreciate it if you would respect the process and not abuse the chat for this proceeding and stop sending the messages that are cropping up. They're obscuring parts of our screen. They are distracting. They're not things that we can consider in the process of making this determination. And again, we'd appreciate it if you would respect the process. Carol.
Thank you. Am I on? I don't see myself. I don't.
I can hear you, Carol.
Okay, but
You're on.
my, okay.
We can kind of see you.
I have no idea. Okay, well, if you can't see me, you will hear me, and I'm just going to have a few things to say. I share all of these 7 concerns that the majority shares, but I had some additional concerns as well. For all the street topologies, large and small, the safe plan creates bike lanes at the sacrifice of the parking opportunity. And I don't think that we've looked carefully enough at the impact of what is being proposed on the variety of neighborhoods. I wish we could have taken a better look, gotten better data on, and I just felt we were wishing it a little bit. The come and go activity, the second concern is that the come and go activity that the state safe plan depicts as existing activity on the road that is, it's not permanent. It comes and it goes, and it's not the same as a bike lane, which 24/7, 365 days a year is not available, even when the bikes are not present. And the fact that we have relied so much on taking away what has been used flexibly, with being shared by sometimes by cars, sometimes by bikes, sometimes vacant, sometimes, it's used for passing, it's used for emergency vehicles. And when I look at the smaller streets, I don't think that we have adequately, I think there's some issues that haven't been resolved yet. And I feel that perhaps we could have taken more time. The other thing is that in our discussions, we had never really spent any time looking at the map that appears on page 14. We always started with page 16, and we were looking at parking that dealt with we looked first at the, I'm a little flummoxed, I've had such a difficult time, excuse me. But the first thing we did was we had spent our first looking at pedestrian issues, and we found that all of those issues were fine. Then we looked at the issues regarding mobility with bicycles, and we came with the feasibility concerns. We did not look very carefully at what was being proposed in terms of deciding where in town the paths would be. And I felt that to recommend all of it before that was done was a little premature. So for that reason, I was in favor of us taking more time. Now, I understand that their opinions were different, and so I accept that. That's why we have three, so that not everyone makes all of the decisions for everyone. But I felt the reason why I really was concerned is that the idea of having a hearing at this point, and having that hearing here in July in the middle of summer, that was a very difficult thing for many people. Most people are not aware of what's going on in the month of August and July. They're away. It's also a time when we're in a COVID crisis, and it's extremely difficult in terms of the kinds of issues that people face. So I felt that to time a meeting for a hearing in late summer was something that really did concern me. And I would like my hope is that the full planning board will give some consideration to that kind of issue. So I hope that this evening that our discussion can keep an open mind and look at other ways to resolve the parking, the biking issue without so much reliance on just the taking parking as a substitute. There are, in fact, I know that on the other side of their town, there are streets in this town with only one side of sidewalks. There are streets that have, I don't know what the measurement is of the public land that is owned between private property and the curb, but it's sometimes, I'm told, somewhere about 8 to 10 feet. Maybe there are streets in this town that have only one side sidewalks, and the other side is just mostly vacant, but it's owned by the city, or at least owned by the township. So I don't really know what the options are, but I felt that to automatically adopt a plan that has not been very imaginative in alternatives to just using the car space. And I think that parking is an issue. Everyone that knows this town knows that business is always struggling, and that all of those restaurants that have the curbside come pick up and whatever. I'm concerned that we have not given enough consideration to the economic impact of not reducing the parking availability to the extent that it's being reduced. So I wanted us to think about other options, look at other alternatives before we fully committed to this plan. And I'm hoping that the board will agree with me that it's certainly not necessary to have a public hearing on an issue of this importance in the end of summer. So that is the concern that I wanted to share with the board. I appreciate that people can differ, and that there are two members of the board who have probably thought as well as hard as I have this year, as I have, and we've come to a different conclusion. But on the other hand, I just wanted to be sure that my opinions were heard, and that's it. And so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I would like to make a motion that we indeed not move forward at this time, and that we give a little more time for the board to have a chance to consider these issues, and I don't think anything needs to be done to set the hearing for July. I think that if we take enough time to look at what we can do, that we could have the same opportunity later on in the year, and the fall would be a much better time and a fairer time for the public to be aware that there's an issue that needs addressing. So that's the motion I make, that the board not have a hearing in July, that the board instead use this time. I think if we could even move forward with perhaps that's an alternative choice, that the board could move forward with the pedestrian issues about which there's a lot of consensus that we could do all of that. We could even move forward with the issues that relate to the safety issues that relate to biking. But I think that the issues related to the land use that's being usurped or changed in terms of dedicating this amount of space, I know there are many communities that are satisfactory and it's working out, and that's the ones that are always quoted. But I also looked and see there's some communities where it's not working out. And so I would really like us to take a little more time with the issues that relate particularly to the set aside of land 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that can be used by no one else. And that even when bicycles are not there, that land has to sit unused, and all the other uses that would take place there are not given an opportunity to happen. The bicycles tend to underuse that space in the winter, and all the other issues that everybody agrees upon. But I guess the difference is that for me, that I wanted to take a hold on it. And I don't think anything too terrible is going to happen in terms of what happens the time that we take this summer. And I really would appreciate that if the board would do that. So that's the motion I'm making.
John,
And
if I
Janice,
could just
as a point of, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, just to clarify, it would not even be physically possible to have a public hearing on this month. And we only have one meeting because of timing, and notice requirements. We have one meeting in August, and we have applications already on the agenda for August. So the earliest we could have a public hearing for this matter would be September. So I think physically we're not ready to move ahead, and that clearly I don't think we can until the fall. So I think that issue is addressed. And I just want to point out that to take a little bit of step back and consider what is the role of the master plan. The master plan is not a site plan. It's not an ordinance. It's not a zoning ordinance. It's a policy document. It's a much more general document. And the way this has been crafted, it's not designing any type of streetscape. It's giving options and establishing a process. And it's embracing the fact that streets are for cars and bikes and all forms of mobility. So that's the only thing I want to step back and say. Bear in mind what the role is of the master plan, and this is not coming up with specific recommendations for different streets, but talking about what the options are and establishing a process.
Yeah, that was my for you, Janice, was just to align on what's even possible from a process standpoint. So thank you.
May the board speak, or is this just what's the process?
Go ahead.
John, I'm sorry, I just unmuted you, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have a motion on the table. Does anyone wish to second it?
What is the motion? I'm missing something.
The motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, but the motion is that we don't proceed with any sort of hearing until September, and that we take more time to flesh out or gain more perspective on the provisions of the plan dealing with the bicycle lanes and bicycle safety. Carol?
Yes, that's a
Does that
pretty
sum it up?
good statement.
Okay. Repeat that again. I think you were muted.
Okay, I said yes, that was fine. That was a good interpretation.
So that's the motion.
Okay, this is Tony. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're almost like you're talking in a tunnel to me, Tony. You got a lot of
Okay, I'll try to be as loud and clear as possible. I really don't know how to move forward on this. The Safe Streets Plan is 171 pages, and I know we're not considering it. We're only looking at taking a very small portion of it. I'm really nervous about taking a few pages that are edited and dropping them into our master plan. Our master plan suggests that bike lanes, pedestrian, it's all there. I look at the Safe Streets plan as a way to do it. In other words, if you want to do this, here are ways to do it. And I've heard this, push to build bike lanes, and I know that the town has made certain streets safer for pedestrian crossings and so forth. But I can't take part in a process where I'm not completely educated in terms of what we are adopting. Not once in the many years talking about this did someone say, here's Valley Road, here's Watchung Avenue, and this is the best way to do it. We've never heard that. We get these plans that are so broad and so, they're almost conflicting with each other. You read the plan, and there's 100 different ways to do 100 different streets. So for me to want to advance that, I just can't do that, and I'm in total agreement with what Carol wants to do. I think that we should, the planning board, if the planning board needs to take action on this, I think that we need some experts, NV5 or whoever put forth the Safe Streets plan, and please make presentations to the planning board so we can really get our arms around this. And I love this stuff, believe me. And when something comes over 3 pages of a 171 page plan with a bunch of edits, street topologies which don't match, I just get brain freeze. So I definitely want to wait on this. If someone said Valley Road's a problem, I mean, I've been biking my whole life. Well, I didn't live here my whole life. I grew up here, moved here, whatever. 8 to 10,000 miles on streets in Montclair over the last decade. I know exactly what goes on. I know how people share. I know what their habits are. No one has ever told me on foot or on a bike you can't get around Montclair. No one's ever said that. So, and I think if someone said, well, here, Bluefield Avenue is a problem, or Valley Road's a problem, and this is a way to fix it, I think that stuff is digestible. But 171 pages of stuff about all these streets, I think that's part of the problem and why this hasn't really advanced, because it's so complex and it's not really definitive. In principle, it's very hard to disagree about the basic principles about sharing streets. No one can really disagree with that. I think Harold made a great point. We share streets right now. But it's just, I think that if the makers of the plan would come and instruct the board and maybe feed us smaller doses to be able to say, yeah, that's a great idea or not, I think that would be great.
Yeah, Tony, a lot of the pages are notes from previous meetings, postings. There's a lot in there if you look back into what exists beyond the 40s, and it's a lot of filler space. It's not that the plan is contingent on page 129. 14 to 31 is the crux of the options that are presented given the typology. So rather than being prescriptive, saying this is exactly what you must do on this particular road, for each typology, it then provides usually 4 to 6 alternative approaches for that road.
Okay,
we could go the more prescriptive.
And then let's say there's 4 alternatives. What good does proposing 4 alternatives do to getting anything done? Who's to decide which alternative is the best alternative?
Yeah, Tony, this is right. So this, not even amending the master plan to include these suite of options, prevents us from even making progress towards particular action on a particular road, hearing, like for us to not even hear from the public on a set of options stops us from making any progress. So this is simply, as you've already said, a complete street plan. It's not prescriptive saying what should happen on every road. It's a arguably comprehensive set of options given the different topologies. And if we feel the typologies they have here are difference of opinion, then we can have that discussion. But I think to not even hear from the public after we've discussed this for 2 years now, I think is not the best way for us to proceed going forward. And again,
yes,
re-emphasizing
I'd like
the
to
fact
speak
of
as
this
well.
being kind of safety first and foremost, and we've already heard, we have more cases of COVID because we do more testing, and that's just nonsense. You don't have biking because you have striping. You have biking regardless, but the striping can make it more safe. So I don't want this to be confused as though we're endorsing one plan versus another, et cetera. This is in line with the master plan, providing more options for the roads going forward. And I don't think it would be rushing it a bit, given, we talked 2 years ago about a pilot program. We applied for a pilot. We didn't get that grant. We've talked about the pedestrian improvements. Doing those, people that are walking versus people that are biking separate is not as advisable as actually addressing each of these together, which I think you've also said, it's good to have a complete plan. But just because it's not prescriptive to a particular road, if anything, this is more preliminary than what you're looking for, which would be more tactical road by road. So I think at the very least, we could hear from the public and have a vote on this, given that we're really not rushing whatsoever. And we couldn't even start the public hearing until September, I think is what Janice was indicating to us.
Click you on. Start talking.
Can I have a word on that? Is that possible?
Go ahead.
Can they hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, Carol, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Oh, I was concerned that maybe Dan, I misunderstood, but we had a map on the existing master plan on page 20 something. And it says that this is just a model, that this is something that might be done. In the plan that has been introduced and said that we cannot edit it, there's no edits possible. It doesn't say that the plan on page 14 is a model. It said this is the plan we are recommending. And when we say yes to that, they're not only saying yes to the idea of what roads are going to be used, it's saying that yes to the ones that are on that map. And that concerned me. And that was one of the reasons why I voted that no, because the map that was in the plan saying that if we adopt this is the map, we had never really talked about. And I felt that we needed an opportunity to understand the details of what we're adopting. The devil is always in the details. And in this case, there's a map that we had never talked about. We'd always said we were looking at pages 16 to whatever. And then I see a resolution that says, if you vote for this, if we pass this, we're not only talking about just any map, we're talking about this map, and it's a final decision. And that is one of the things that made me say, I don't think we're ready to do that. We need time to see what it is we're approving. Thank you. That was what I wanted to say.
That's how I looked at this. These streets are very detailed, typology 1 through typology. It's very prescriptive. And then even when you get into, let's say, typology 2 or typology 1, it says a bunch of stuff needs to be done, but then you're presented with four options, 3 of which make no sense whatsoever, in my opinion. So I just can't, I just think that I'm not suggesting that the public doesn't weigh in on this. I wasn't suggesting that. I just think that there should be better information presented to the planning board about how this safe streets plan will actually dovetail with the master plan.
Yeah, I think that was a consensus as well 2 years ago as well. So not that those points are not valid, but I think it's very clear from recent sentiment and everything you see driving around town that hearing from the public on this plan is worthwhile, and interested to hear from others as well.
Yeah, but we're just not having a public hearing just to hear and get feedback on the plan. We would be having a public hearing on whether or not the plan should be adopted, we're recommending. We're saying that this plan is good enough to be adopted, so we want public feedback.
No, that's true. And Chairwoman, I don't mean to misspeak. I do think that the plan is such that we could amend the master plan. So I'm not saying that we tweak it through public hearing, et cetera. I actually fully support voting on the plan as written, but I realize there could be, differences. I just didn't want you to misunderstand me as thinking that, we hear from the public, and I actually think it stands as it is, but yeah.
Well, and my hesitation about this again, goes back to, what we talked about at the last meeting. We have to be very careful what we put into the master plan, because as you know, from sitting on hearings where the master plan is entered as evidence, we get hit over the head with the master plan says X, Y, and Z, so you should adopt whatever application we're putting in front of you. And unless the wording is very specific, in other words, no room for misinterpretation, no room for spin on it, then if we put it in the master plan, it might be spun in a way that we're not intending it to be spun on an application that comes before us later on. And I'm just not comfortable personally with the language. I wasn't comfortable at the last meeting, and there's nothing that has occurred between that meeting and now that has made me more comfortable with the language with respect to the biking provision. There's, both opinions that come out of the committee acknowledge that there's a number of issues that are raised by this plan but not addressed. And, I'm just not sure that the plans as presented do enough to enhance what's already in the master plan in a way that will be positive for the town. But I think I agree with Carol that with more time and some effort that we could get there. We mentioned about we've been talking that there's been a discussion for 2 years. Well, what's happened in the past 2 years since this last came up for discussion?
So we applied for the pilot, and it was so limited to a certain prescriptive plan.
But
Janice, I think you can provide more.
What's happened with the plan? Has there been any more clarification? Has there been any more study done with it? Nothing. As far as I can see, it's still the same plan that we had 2 years ago. And the issues that we had 2 years ago, to me, haven't been addressed. So I think that, but by the same token, I don't think that we should hold up, again, as mentioned at the last meeting, I don't think that we should hold up the pedestrian provisions because of the bicycling language. So I would, in my opinion, it would be better to split it off, to spend some time, just trying to make sure that this language is right, because I see a whole lot of issues that I just don't know what the answers are to, that I don't see with respect to the pedestrian provisions.
And part of the challenge, because we did discuss this at length in our subcommittee, part of the challenge with pursuing the pedestrian improvements is, just as a very specific example, you come to an intersection, you rework the intersection for pedestrian improvements, change light fixtures, a blinking light, maybe it's the kind that you can hear when it's flashing, but at that time you could also have a light that's green for the bike to go and the turn to be red, etc. So it's a bit of a challenge to adopt just the pedestrian improvements without improvements for people that may be biking. And so in subcommittee, we wrestled with that and said it's better to do this together if at all possible. But just so you understand the discussion we had.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Carmel.
Carmel.
Yeah, I just want to ask.
Yeah, but I'd like to say something to that.
Okay. Go ahead, Carol.
Go ahead, Carol.
Carol, you're not coming through. Carol?
Did we lose you altogether? It looks like her microphone may have been muted.
Yes, that's what it looks like.
All right, now it's not. Carol? Carol, want to try again? Do you hear me? Tony, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Janice.
Okay. All right. We're waiting for Carol. You're not muted, Carol. You should be able to speak. Well. Now, Carol, you can speak now. I don't hear anything.
I don't hear anything either.
Should I go?
Hello?
Should I say something?
Oh, now I hear. Okay, Carol, now I hear you.
Okay, good. The thing I was trying to say, and I think that's something I agree with Dan. I think what we do is because I looked at it while we were this summer. I was looking at the safety issues that and that with the whether or not we have lanes, and I think it would be possible for us to tease out the safety issues that deal with biking. I come up with three categories. I came up with three categories, and those are that there are safety issues that deal with pedestrians that are totally non-controversial and could be implemented. There are safety issues that deal with biking that could be implemented and have nothing to do with whether or not it needs a parking lane to implement it. And then there are those safety issues with biking that require parking lanes. I think it was very difficult to tease them out, by the way, and I did do that. I have a list of those. I don't have them right in front of me, but we could make some progress on taking care of those things. There's only the issues that deal with parking lanes and the extent to which they be put
Carol,
in use. I'm not saying that all parking lanes are as long as it does not involve us in hard lining the various streets in town. And if there was a hill that particularly needed something to a space and it was available, I'm not against. I don't think the idea of the pool to help you use as limited fashion that you need to against bike lanes. But I am against doing it at a time when you draw a map and say, this is the one, we're not going to that, that's the one we're working on. So thank you very much. That I agree with the mission on, along with the, as long as we wanted to. The only part that we need to hold on is the ones that involve us hardscaping our real estate and leaves little of the road of other. If you look at the maps on the roads that they have shown us, anything that they have two categories, 37 and a half, up to 37 and a half, and that which is 38 and a half. And what you can do is just about the same on all of them. And so, you know, I really feel that we should take the time to look at that, and I'm quite amenable to combining the issues that deal with biking safety and pedestrian safety that everybody could live with, and I think they could get through very easily. Thank you.
I have a question.
Carmel?
Yeah. So, Janice, what is currently being done when a road is under consideration for any kind of change? Are there anything that the engineering department would be looking at that deal with biking? Or is it not on their radar at all?
Well, Montclair has done biking plans. We must have 10 separate plans that we've done over the last 15 years that address biking, and I may be exaggerating, but we have quite a few plans that are on the books. But essentially, the township, if they feel that they want to put biking lanes in, I've seen them use sharrows on certain streets. They have the option to do it. They really don't have to go to the planning board for that. That's more of a staff decision with council guidance.
Is there any document such as the Safe Streets Plan that would give them options to look at that they
No,
would use? No.
no.
So isn't this document helpful from that point of view?
Yeah,
Your engineering.
what a lot of there are many reasons to do this plan, because number one, it provides a broad, comprehensive policy. Another advantage of having a plan is when you go after grants, they want to see that you have a comprehensive plan that addresses biking, and we currently don't have that. And this plan is intended to fulfill that requirement and show a commitment to complete streets, yet still provide the flexibility to design the streets based on local conditions.
So you'd be looking at, on a case-by-case basis, how you might change a particular street.
Right.
We're not looking at this point, a whole loop around town. We're just looking, these streets look appropriate.
But what happens is, at least it prioritizes certain streets where it makes more sense and there's more connections. So it gives a framework and prioritizes where certain types of improvements, such as addressing bicycles, make sense because of the connections that it provides.
And this study was done by parking experts, traffic experts.
It was NV5 and assorted other consultants who specialize in bike plans.
So I feel like we have had input from people who are knowledgeable about the roads within the town and the possibilities of change to reconfigure these roads to improve them from a safety point of view for cyclists.
Yeah, and I believe that they did make one presentation to the planning board back in 2017.
I think it's possible with the time that we have between now and September to even look at not only having some expertise come in and present and help us, but I think we also have the chance to tease out exactly which of the biking rules are ideas could be helpful. I think it's an excellent resource. That is, I've always said that. I really would like to compliment the people who have done such an excellent job of giving us as a resource. But there's a different thing between something that you can draw upon and something that you actually legislate with, in the sense of, as I say, if you look at what we have now, we say that this particular map is something you could use, and in the document that we say we will not edit, it says as is. No, if we pass this, it's as is. That map in this one says this is the one we will use, and that's a big transition.
And one other thing to note, I think, on the feasibility issues, there's many of these, so it has to do with policing or which configuration you use, et cetera. Some of these are actually addressed further downstream when you're actually figuring out the exact design to a particular road, or what different ordinances you may need for how people on bikes navigate around people that are walking, navigate around buses. These, again, to the point, don't preclude us considering the complete plan. And I think, just as Carol mentioned, it's quite difficult to tease out those that are walking from those that are biking and their relationship with those that may be driving. And I think that speaks to the need for a complete plan that doesn't carve it up into what you do for each one without considering the other.
I'd like to see Carol.
What I would say to that is that, okay, what I would say to that is that it is also very possible, knowing our budgetary issues, knowing the time it's going to take to implement those other plans, knowing that the resources are not just sitting there waiting for us to use. But meanwhile, we could do some things for safety, particularly for the pedestrian thing. We could get that through. We could start working on doing the things that are likely to happen, the lower cost budget things that we could do incrementally. And we could do the same thing for those biking concerns that would add safety. I'm for safety as much as anyone is. I'm very much for safety, but I'm also for wisdom. And I think that we have to do things in ways that are possible. And that's incremental in these days. You're not going to do it all in the whole cloth. So it seems to me that what we could do is start where we are, do what we can do. And so rather than jumping ahead and locking ourselves in,
Okay, Carol, I think
You're breaking up, Carol.
yeah.
Still, we're having problems hearing you. Yep, your signal's fading.
Right.
vision that
Here's
we're waiting and move forward with the parts of the plan of the biking that we could tease out and get working on. Because those other long-term projects, they're pretty big, and I don't think we're really delaying the project itself by moving ahead on the pedestrian and the biking issues that can be done now.
another thought about this, perhaps maybe we can look at the way that we might endorse this, because I get the argument that, yeah, these are options. What I'm afraid of is that what's in this plan will be looked at as the only option.
That's
and
right.
maybe
That's right.
with maybe if it's framed in such a way that we're adopting this as a concrete plan that shows certain options, but those options, again, raise concerns that are going to have to be addressed on an individual case-by-case issue with respect to, or should I say street-by-street issue as to how and when they might get implemented. Because remember, we're not implementing any of this. The planning board is not going to be implementing this. This is going to be implemented by other entities. And so we don't know what they're gonna pick out to try and do first or second, or what they will prioritize, in other words. So, you know, it's again, I just want to be careful that this isn't used as a bludgeon to force or to endorse something that we're really not meaning it to endorse, because it doesn't address other issues that we're not seeing right now, because we're not dealing with, you know, a concrete proposal. Carmel?
I thought that the type of language that you're describing would be the type of language that would be in the master plan itself. And that would take care of the fact that we are taking this Safe Streets plan, putting it into the master plan, and then within the master plan, describing how it would be used. So everything you
I'm
say
not
is
so sure.
one doesn't preclude the other. And
I'm not so sure.
okay, and the other,
and maybe we can look at that. Maybe we can look at that.
the other thing I was thinking was that ideally you would have a, I hate to say committee, but a group of people who would manage what the engineering people, a traffic person, a planning person, probably someone from the biking community, who would look at proposals that might come in and determine, you know, what makes sense. I mean, everybody is interested in safety, but there's also a big common sense element about this. Does it make sense to have a bike lane on the busiest street in Montclair? Maybe not, but maybe it makes sense to have it someplace else, and someone would be looking at that. But I think if you have this plan as part of the master plan, it gives you a roadmap, so to speak, or some guidance and some options. And I really don't see the downside of having it as part of the master plan.
I would like to make sure that other people looked at this as we went on. I wouldn't leave it, I wouldn't be comfortable leaving it up to chance because of the fact that we're not dealing in an ideal environment when you're talking about municipal changes. You're not dealing in an environment that isn't without influences from all sorts of directions. So, you know, I would be more comfortable with explicit language, you know, that provides certain specific requirements as to how this is looked at and how it is used. And I'm not so sure that the master plan in its current configuration, you know, would cover that, you know, if we just pull this into the master plan without adding to it, perhaps. Daniel?
Yes, Janice, it may be helpful. So you had mentioned that we would, of course, have to adjust wording in the master plan to show exactly how this would be amended, or how the master plan would be amended to include. I don't know if that's the extent of it, but could you, just as a point of process, explain what we would need to do before we even had a public hearing in terms of adopting, adjusting some of the language so that the master plan could be amended? Because I think that Chair Wynn's point is that some of that language that Chair Wynn is noting would be part of that process. Is that right, Janice?
Yeah, I think the next step would be to actually draft the draft an amendment to the plan that reflects the conversation and the direction that the board wants to go in. And at that point, when you have the language that you're reviewing, you can review it word by word to make sure it expresses what you want it to say. Right now, what we have is just, I think, a position statement. We put that into a draft amendment, then we can go through and make sure that you're comfortable with how it's expressed.
Yeah, that's exactly how we talked about it in our committee, that if this were passed as is, then the next step would be drafting the master plan language and with input from the planning board to see how this Safe Streets plan would be used. So that was our thinking exactly.
Okay, so I don't know about the part by passing it as is, because we're not actually doing that, but I wouldn't mind taking a stab at doing that amendment. And I would also, in the meantime, I'd like to see Carol's point. She said she put a list together of things that pulled out and whatnot. I'd like to see what she pulled out to continue that perspective. Again, since we're not going to be able to do this until September, at the earliest, let's make use of the time between now and then and do that to try and make some progress here. How does that sound, everyone?
I'd like to say one more thing, that I feel like we keep saying how we can't do this and we can't do that. Let's figure out how we can do it. It would be a good
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do, Carmel. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
I feel like we've been very negative, and now that I've gone to the other side, I'm like super positive about trying to get something done.
Well, we know that's just you. We know that. That's okay. But I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out a way to make some progress here, and to get something done, as opposed to letting another year or two go by while we float in limbo, because that's clearly not the way to go. So if we can, Janice, how long you'll take a stab at drafting the amendment?
Absolutely, I can do that, and I'll reach out to Carol and get her finer points. No. I can do that.
Yeah, you can circulate that to us. How soon do you think you can get that out?
Why don't we just do some of that examining and not vote tonight and to put let's proceed in terms of trying to do better with the clarifications that we're talking about.
Well, this is Tony. Can you guys hear me? I really don't know why.
Wait, is that you, Tony? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why it needs to be a part of the master plan. I'm really trying to figure it out. The master plan, for example, says implement a complete streets network. The streets complete plan is a thing. It exists. If the council wants to adopt this as the plan, or anyone wants to use this as guidance, there's no problem in using it for guidance. It exists right now. So if someone wants to build a bike lane, we know the master plan says build bike lanes, do this, do that. If someone wanted to build one, this Safe Streets, Complete Streets Implementation Plan is guidance. It is. It's a thing. So people could follow it. I just don't know. I mean, I try to put all of these detailed design topologies into a master plan, which I personally think should be more broad. It should outline the sort of overall goal of the township and its master plan. I don't think we want to get into 6 different street typologies and all the detail that's in this 171 pages and somehow try to put that in the master plan. I think the master plan should be much broader and goal-oriented over a long period of time. And I'll say it again, let's get some advocates, go build one safe street. Just go build it. And the mayor's on here now, build a bike lane. Or, Rob, and the council, get some money, build something. And I think that if you build something and people really like it, they'll want more. But all that's happened for a long time is this desire to do something and nothing gets done. I mean, there's nothing to get in the way from building a bike lane wherever the council or the public wants right now.
Tony, it may be possible, you're right, this is implemented. It could be adopted by the council. The council asked the planning board to consider it. That's part of the reason why it was sent to the planning board. In fact, it references the planning board that it does provide a comprehensive approach. It may be possible to reference the specifics and not adopt the specifics in that plan, but at least reference it in our master plan as a guidance document for bike paths and complete streets.
It exists right now. It's a thing. It is a complete streets implementation plan. The master plan said, put this together. There it is. It's the plan. It was funded and it exists. So anyone can use it. I mean, no one needs to ignore it. I just don't,
Janice, is it that if it's not a part of the master plan, it's not as readily recognized? If you're applying for grants and
right. The grants want to see the master plan policy for bikes, and ours is very general right now. And this is an opportunity. We've done the work. In fact, our master plan calls for a bike plan. It recommends it. It's one of the recommendations in it. And it was when we started working on this, we realized it's difficult to come up with a detailed bicycle plan because there's so many different street characteristics. So I think the implementation plan was purposefully flexible and process oriented to address the various issues within each community, but provide more of a framework.
Okay, so if one is applying for a grant and our master plan says, have a bike plan or have a safe streets plan, well, we've got one. So you put down in the grant, our master plan, here's our safe streets complete, here's all the typologies that we considered. It's an awesome document. It's 171 pages.
It was never adopted. So how can we say it's our plan when it was never adopted?
Pardon me?
You have to go through an adoption process. When you do the grants, they want to see where in your master plan do you have a bike plan and where does it support this?
They want to see that the town endorses it, Tony. And the town's endorsement is through the master plan.
How
Otherwise, it's just a plan that's been prepared that anyone could have prepared. And if they're going to give a grant and they don't have proof that the town has endorsed it, then there's a possibility that they might be giving them the parties a grant that they can't move forward on because the town won't go along with it.
How often does that happen?
And that's,
I'm sorry.
Who's speaking?
Robin.
Oh, hi, Robin.
Hi. How often does that where we might not get a grant if we have no plan?
Well, in the grant that I just submitted, that's one thing I couldn't support because the specifics for this particular bike path, this has to do with the Essex Hudson Greenway. It's not in our master plan. We don't have anything specific to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't, I can only add the general language about bicycle paths, but nothing specific.
So that's separate from the pilot?
I'm sorry.
It's a separate one.
So we didn't get the pilot program and we didn't get the subsequent one. So that's
this one I just submitted. So it was due July 1st. So
We may, okay, we may or may not. That's the
Right.
decision
I'm
still
just
out on
saying,
that.
there's always,
Okay.
they look for consistency with your master plan when you go for grants. So that's where we need more detail. Because our master plan, you've read it, it says, one of the recommendations, prepare a bike plan.
I'm not so sure I want to vote on this evening, but I would like to see what the amendment, what our resolution would look like.
Yeah.
And
I
how we
don't
would
think there's-
incorporate this into the master plan before I vote.
I don't think there's any
Daniel?
need to vote.
Yes,
Daniel?
I was just going to say the master plan calls for what this is, and it feels like we're tripping over ourselves a little bit in that we wanted a pilot, we couldn't get the grant. We want these other grants, and we're not even fulfilling what our master plan is saying for us to do. And I think the chairman's point, if we do work on the language, that may address some of the concerns on the call now. So if we do position this as an amendment to the master plan with the right wording that addresses some of the concerns expressed tonight, and then also with recommendation 1 about a little bit of the process for implementing some of the design types, I think we could come back with that. Janice, let me know if July 27th is too quick or if August 10th. But if we could come back to the planning board with, okay, this is the amendment that we are suggesting we all post for public notice, have a vote on, then that should enable us to have one more conversation before we post for public notice, September 10th, which, as I understand it, is the earliest date that we possibly could post for public, to have a public hearing. I think we could proceed in that way. Would like to hear from others. But I really don't want to be in the case where we're continuing to not, it feels like we're tripping a little if we're applying for grants, but we haven't really, done our homework on the plan that we already have. Because right now, as I understand it, Janice, this is just some good ideas that consultants gave us in terms of when you apply on a grant. It has no actual standing, and that's where it's been for 3 years now.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I think it'd be difficult to have it on the agenda for the 27th, since that's 2 weeks from today. We could possibly do, we have one meeting in August 10th. We'll see, because that, at that meeting, 37 Orange Road is coming back to the planning board.
Oh.
Okay. So you have a fairly big, hopefully it'll be the final hearing on that application. I don't know how long it'll take, but if we get through it, maybe we can schedule a discussion on this, or at least put it as a discussion item on the agenda, and see if we can get
And then we could have a second meeting, short meeting, maybe later in the month, since we only have the one meeting.
If you want to schedule a special meeting, go ahead, we can do that.
Well, no, I was going to say, if we couldn't get to it, if we see we can't get to it at that meeting, we could schedule just a special meeting just to have this conversation.
Right.
Since we don't have 2 scheduled. So why don't we do that?
Okay.
How does the rest of the board feel about that?
I'm okay with it.
I see some head shaking. I don't know. Blank stares. Wake up, everybody.
That sounds good. Just the meeting after the August meeting would have to be far enough in advance from the September meeting for us to post for public notice. So I think that's the only logistical consideration with the timing.
We could have a meeting in certainly we. Even if we went to a special meeting, we could still have a meeting in September at the second meeting in September. I think we still have enough time.
It will have to, just so that you know, it's going to have to be the second meeting in September, because we have a really, really big application that I think is going to be starting on September 14th. Okay, that's the Church Street lot. So I've kind of penciled it in for September 28th.
So that works for.
It works for me. I
Guys?
Want to maybe throw out
It's okay.
a couple of comments just as we're thinking about crafting the language. The thing that I like about the complete states implementation plan is that it's got some great ideas on all different varieties for options on how to address mobility in a street, and I like a lot of the examples. I think where I get tripped up is where the plan lists priority corridors, and it seems to me like this is a priority for this specific street, And I get that, there's several options and recommendations and possibilities. But when I look to see several recommendations, half or more, I personally don't see working for a specific street. That's where I get tripped up. So if there was maybe a way to use the typologies and the options, but not actually name specific streets, I would see that as more helpful, and maybe that'll remove a roadblock to some of the kind of round and round discussions we've been having.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think that's a good point, because that's exactly where I was getting tripped up. I looked at Bellevue. I looked at the 4 options for Bellevue, 3 of which involved taking, and this is in the business district, taking parking away from one side of the street. 3 out of the 4 options. That doesn't work. So now I'm thinking, okay, that's not good. Let's go to the next street, Valley Road, and 3 out of the 4 eliminate parking. So how do we know which is the best option when we're just presenting a bunch of stuff? I looked at a lot of different areas in town, and I didn't see a lot of workable options. Realistically, when it really gets down to brass tacks, I just didn't see, Carmel's got the 30% in there. I think Keith having, kind of a range of different construction types without the streets is a great idea, because you don't really need to consider that one particular district. And then you check off the box, you get the grant, and then you sort of figure it out later. But if this is all about getting a grant, well, do whatever. I mean, this thing exists right now, so do whatever we need to get the grant, and then you study something.
Yes.
And you figure out if we can do it or not, and then do it if we can. So that's exactly where I was getting tripped up.
Okay, good point. Good point, Keith.
Daniel?
Just to make sure, I don't want us to whittle this down to a nub. Janice, is there a point at which this does not count as a complete streets plan if we're not actually naming streets in the plan?
I don't know. I'll have to think about it, because it's kind of, if it walks like a duck and it acts like a duck, is it a duck? So if you characterize the streets and describe them, but you don't show it on a map, it's kind of a roundabout way. You know what I mean?
Okay, it's just, it was just
I don't know if I had to think about it.
Yeah, because again, I'm the one that wants pages 14 to 31, amended into the master plan, as close to how they're written as possible, although I know we do have to edit some of it to go into the master plan. And so, I'm willing for us to compromise a bit to get to something that the planning board can ultimately vote on. However, I don't want us to whittle it down so far that it's not actually a complete streets plan, nor is it even furthering the interest of the broader community, advancing safety, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Janice, could you just run the dates by me one more time, please?
Okay. For the discussion of this,
and then a possible hearing.
Okay. Well, we will present the initial draft for discussion at the planning board on August 10th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If we don't get to it that night because we have another application,
mm-hmm.
we'll schedule a special meeting that evening for another date in August so the planning board can discuss it. I anticipate that if the planning board's comfortable with it, we can schedule the public hearing at the September 28th meeting.
Okay.
Either the September 14th or the September 28th. It depends. I have to see when this application for Church Street gets scheduled.
Okay. The reason why I had asked, just run those by me, I think the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur is around there. I have my
Robin, I think you're right. I think it's the 28th September.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't do very good on this idea.
Okay, I will check into that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So is that a plan, everyone? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah.
okay.
As soon as you can circulate some stuff for us to look at, Janice, and maybe, and to your point, last point, Daniel, maybe we can deal with that in introductory and adoption language, as opposed to, and clarify that, as opposed to rewriting sections and watering it down.
Great, right.
I really have to sit down myself. We can do a lot with editing and presentation. I just have to look at the materials to see what works best. And, thankfully, Janice will take the first crack at it. All right.
Thankfully.
All right. So with that, we have payment of bills.
I don't think I submitted any.
There are no bills.
There were no bills,
And
so.
the CFO had an easy time this month.
Yes.
I reviewed no bills. It was great.
Right. So I believe that does it for this evening, everyone. Thank you for your participation and your patience. And look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Same back time, same back channel.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Channel.
Good night.